All right, I use a scroll saw for minor small things, thin up to 2 inches. I do wood and metal. I start out with a pattern paper. I use rubber cement. I really like using rubber cement. I find that by using rubber cement, my cleanup is real easy. I do not have to be extra neat putting it on. I can be sloppy because it just kind of rolls up in your fingers or off your wood. And once it dries on your wood, it's pretty easy to remove. What's also nice about it is that once I put it on, if I do need to get it right off, even like when you have to adjust it, I can get it right off. Now, another method, of course, is using the spray adhesive, and that's very popular nowadays. When you use the spray adhesive, it does have some disadvantages and some advantages, of course. It does give you a nice uniform coating. It does go on really quick. Um, but when you use the spray adhesive, you're going to find out that it's not as convenient, I feel, as the rubber cement. It's also more expensive. Now, the spray adhesive I use is just something I happen to have on hand. I wouldn't probably buy this. I think it's pretty expensive. I'd buy a cheaper version. I usually take it outside to spray it, but inside here is what I'm doing now. Again, the problem is if you put it down and you got to move it a half an inch, you're going to have a hard time. So I don't like it. Anyway, also now I put packing tape over my pattern. This does a couple of things. One, it will ensure if for any reason the glue didn't stick or I'm at the edge and it might come up, it stays down onto the wood. The other reason is people believe, a lot of experts believe, that this lubricates your blade a little bit as you're cutting. I can't really say it does or doesn't. All I know is that I use it all the time. I put the packing tape on. All right. So once that's on, I'm ready to actually cut. And when I'm going to cut, I like to start out and cut my inside pieces first. Other ones, the ones that need a a hole created first, drilling a hole. So what I do is I drill my hole, in this case, in the middle of this flower, and I'm going to drill my hole, and then I'm going to take that over to the scroll saw, and that's where my first cuts will be, in the center. I just kind of like to get that out of the way. All right, so now here I'm going to put a wood blade on, and I'm using a number 7, which is okay, mid range. It's not for the thickest wood. I use Flying Dutchman blades. I've always had. Nice, nice guy used to run it. I think he died now, but somebody's taken it over. But I still do like the Flying Dutchman's blade. When you put it in, you have to make sure that the teeth are facing downwards. Now, some of the blades are very fine. This one's not as fine as some, but so you run your finger up and down the blade. When you're going up, if your fingers catch a little bit, then you know it's proper. Now, I'm a bottom feeder, and that means I like to put my project up from the bottom into the hole and then tighten the top. But first, what I always do is I put the blade in the top, get it lined up on the bottom because the bottom is a little harder. Then I go and you can just see what I'm doing. I'm putting the blade up to the bottom, tightening it up, make sure everything's good and tight. Tighten my tension till you get that little twang. I don't do that checking of the twang. I know some people do, but I never do. I just tighten it up. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out the inside of this flower. And this is not going to be hard to do, especially when I'm only using maybe 1/4 inch wood thickness. All right, so once that's done, I will then start on the outside of my flower. But as you can see, this is when you get near the bottom, it's pretty easy. Raise it up, loosen the tension, grab the blade out, and there it is, all cut out. All right. So now I'm going to drop my blade. I don't have any more inside cuts. Tighten everything up, get it ready, and I will go in to cut the outside of the flower. And again, this is wood. Wood is pretty easy with the scroll saw. I don't do as much scroll sawing work now that I know how to use a laser cutter and I have access to a laser cutter. To be honest, I look at a project and say, could I cut that on the laser cutter? And I can. So a lot of times I do. But the scroll saw is valuable in my shop. I do use it at times. Okay, flour is done. So now I'm going to go to the metal. Now I'm going to take an old flower and I'm going to run my marker around it. This is how I'm going to cut the metal around this. I use the black marker. It shows up pretty good for when I'm got the blade running and everything like that. So I'm just going to go trace around, and I got a reasonably small sheet of tin. This is what I'm using right now, tin. I don't use much metal. I use tin or aluminum. All right. And that's one, and then I'm going to start on the other, which you're not going to get to see. And then what happens is when I'm all done, I have a whole bunch more that I then will cut out. So there they are. They're finishing up. These are all petals. These are going to be flowers. All right. So once I'm done with all that, my next project is going to be, oh, there we all are. And you can see how to use a pencil for the top right ones because here they are, because they were very hard to get a marker in the little tight areas. All right, so I'm going to use these cutters. I've had these forever, and I'm going to make it into smaller pieces just because I find it easier to work on my saw table when I have smaller pieces. All right, once that's done, my next step is to take them over to get the proper blade. Now, again, I have Flying Dutchman. I do have a few Pegasus blades, but I do Flying Dutchmans. And I'm going to get my proper blade for the thickness of the wood. Again, it's not too thick. If they do have jeweler blades, but they're very fine, they're very small, and you'll break them more often. I have used them on some very small projects, and you'll see them later. I do use the DeWalt, and I do use it sitting down. That's my knee on and off button that you see. It's not metal. All right, as you can see, I tried putting a magnet to it, so it's not going to be metal. So I'm not going to be looking for a metal blade. I'm going to be looking for an aluminum blade. Again, I'm going to sit myself down because I find that over the years, I've gotten either better at doing this sitting down or worse at doing it standing up, whatever way you want to look at it. Maybe I always could do better sitting down, but for years I stood up, I had it on a stand. Now it's on a rolling cart. I got a knee on off button, extra blades I store on the sides, the ones that haven't broken and I think still might have a little cut if I have to do a quick cut. I usually just grab something from the side. Putting the blade in, this is going to be a little bit finer. I have to make sure that the teeth are facing down, so I run my finger up and then I put in the top and drop it to the bottom. Always do that first. Make sure I get it. That's how I do it. I won't have any inside cuts, but I always still do it the same way. Now I'm going to tighten everything up. All right. Tighten the bottom. I always double check everything. Sometimes it's hard to see getting that blade in the bottom. That's sometimes the hardest part of anything, getting the blade in, tightening up my tension. Okay, now I'm going to get ready to cut. Okay, what I like to do with metal, I don't like to wear gloves in the shop, but with metal I do because it's sharp for one thing, and two, I need a little bit more of a grip. I have to slide this metal on this metal table. It's not flat as you can see, so that creates some problems. Uh-oh, it didn't start. So what I had to do is get my persuader out to tell it to start. A persuader is basically a nice big hammer. Okay, so every once in a while my saw says I'm not going to start, and I'm going to say yes you are. So a couple of good whacks of it, and you can see it starting up a little bit, and there I'm good to go. All right, so you got to hold the metal down. It's very hard. It's not even sometimes, and the blade catches a lot. So what you're going to get is you're going to get some jumping. Okay, I keep my hands very close to the blade, as you're going to see, because I got to hold it tight. There it is, one leaf cut out of my flower. All right, now Now here where you can see, watch my hands how they jump. This is the blade catching on the edge. I'm not in the middle of the metal, I'm on the edge. It catches more in the end. It also will catch if your blade is dull. So if you're trying to stretch a blade out, this is another indication that, okay, I better stop and change the blade. But as you can see, every time my hand jumps, I keep my finger very close to the back because it's not going to get cut in the back, and it helps keep the pressure on. Here's just a simple drill a hole through the center of these flowers. So you're not going to see a whole lot here. Everybody knows how to do this. All right, so that's what now I'm cutting with the shears, and as you can see, the tin snips, they do work on big objects where you don't have to get really in tight areas. Now here I use my flapper. My flapper is on the end of my um, Mark Shopsmith, and I just want to get the black marks off, and I want to get also all the um, goo, the bird droppings, whatever may be on this metal. I want to get a clean surface for I'm going to spray paint it. So I get that all looking sharp and all looking good. All right, now what happens now is I go over and I'm just going to look at all my stuff, see that I have everything cut, and there's a couple of wooden pieces. I want to see how they hold up. There's some metal pieces, and there's all the scrap that I had. Okay, no longer have. Thrown away. All right, so now I'm going to show you a picture of some very small things I've done in metal, and you can see I had to use the Dura blade for this. It is a lot harder to do this kind of stuff. I don't like to do this a lot. I could have done this in wood, but the plan was that it was going to be outside, and it ended up staying inside. But I did cut these out in metal. Again, the smaller the blade, the easier to cut, but you're still going to have some jumping around. Kind of scary when that happens. It's like when a blade breaks. Boom. That's what happens. Now here you can see the finished project. They're all in the ground. They're all painted. And when you put them on round sticks like that, the wind will sometimes tend to blow them around. And I found out that if I bend the rod, put it in here, then it won't roll around with the wind. It's locked in if I bury that.
And that's all, folks.